Ken Jocelyn. I've got a treat for you guys today. I've got my new friend, Joey Muray. Boy, did I just rhyme? Did I literally just throw some Run DMC on you guys today? I'm super excited. Joey and his partner, Russ, they founded Wealth Without Wall Street. It's a way for kingdom-minded people really to establish and build residual income so that the residual income, if you've read, what's the book I'm looking for by Robert Kiyosaki? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Wealthy people have residual income that earns more money than they spend. So you can be wealthy even if you don't have but $2,000 a month of residual income coming in. I love that. My good friend Sharon Lecter is co-author on that book. So I talk to Sharon quite often. Joey, welcome to the show, my friend.
Dude, always a pleasure to be with like-minded people. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I love that. Dude, I'm not sure if I butchered your introduction or if it was good or not, but tell people a little bit more about you guys and what you're doing at Wealth Without Wall Street.
Well, I'll tell you, I love to be in the room with people who are talking about impact. And at the end of the day, Wealth Without Wall Street exists to help people get out of the rat race. Just like you talked about, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad idea is to take your active income and turn it into passive income so that you de-risk all that. You are the only asset at work. You need to start getting your money to start actually paying for your monthly expenses. And the only way you can do that is you have to have a plan. You have to have a process. And we created the passive income operating system just for that reason, to help thousands, mostly entrepreneurial people to figure out a way to stop putting money away into things like Wall Street that you can't touch or control and won't really provide any sort of freedom until you're 65 or 70. And what do we want? We want the freedom today to spend our time how we want, with whom we want. And man, we talked pre-call about our daughters. I have 5 daughters, and man, there's nothing more that I want to do than invest in them and in their, this is the time of life to do it. I'm not going to be able to invest in them when they're 40, right? Or 50. Now, this is the time, and the only time I can buy my time back is if that money is constantly creating that freedom. So that's what
was the thing, Joey, that caused you to start this? Like, what was the pain point or the problem that you saw that said, man, this needs a solution?
Well, I always go back to my family because that's one of my big whys. I was sitting there in the mortgage business actually years ago. I was in the mortgage business for 11 years. And
I was a former mortgage broker, by the way.
You were? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then that you're a slave to that next phone call from those realtor partners, right?
Yep.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're on vacation. And for me, I was at the beach, and I distinctly remember these days, Ken, where I'm sitting up in the condo, whatever, right there on the beach, and my kids and my wife are like, hey, I'm going down to the beach. And I say, hey, girls, I'll be right down. I just have to take one more call. And what would happen, Ken? I would be 3 or 4 hours later walking down the boardwalk, and envision this. There's the boardwalk behind the condo. I'm walking down the boardwalk, and they're walking back, going back towards the condo because they're done for the day. And you can imagine the disappointment on their face that dad is physically with them, but mentally and emotionally, I am light years away. I can't even be present because I'm stuck on the hamster wheel of active income. And if you're a business owner, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's one of those moments that was just draw a line in the sand and say, this can't be what it's all about, right? Yeah. This is not freedom. This is not abundance. This is like, I'm enslaved, and I'm not going to keep doing that.
What was when you were like, when that happened and you said, I want to do something different, what led you to doing what you're doing now? And explain maybe a little bit more to our audience about exactly what it is you guys do.
So I'll tell you, Russ and I actually got our start by reading a book called Become Your Own Banker. And this was in 2009, that I was still in the mortgage business. He was still a traditional financial planner, like a Wall Street guy. So he's made a 180-degree turn. I've made a 180-degree turn from the big bank world. And we've read this book, and it started with the idea that you just have to start thinking like a bank. And part of that is taking back control of your finances and no longer abdicating that responsibility to Wall Street or somebody else. Like, this is what you've been entrusted with. Like, these funds, You're a steward of them. But what we've been duped into thinking with the Wall Street mindset is that, man, we're not smart enough. We don't have enough degrees. Like, we don't understand all these complex financial modeling, portfolio theory garbage. And the problem is, so what we do, we just hand it over to somebody else. And what do
They
they
here,
do?
manage this for me.
Right.
Yeah.
They've duped us in saying, you know what, Ken, the answer is retirement. You need to start stacking up cash until you're 65 on this mountain. And then eventually you'll be able to start taking dollars off the top of that mountain and just hope that they don't run out before you die. But Ken, I'm going to tell you, that's the most scarce prospect of all time. It goes against everything that we understand. And I'll give you an example. I was at the beach, and all my stories around the beach, Ken. I don't know what
I love the beach, bro. I'm all about. I want to invite next time. I'm coming with you.
Okay, Cape Sandblast. That's where I go. I love Cape Sandblast. But I'm sitting there. I have my shirt on there. It says "Wealth Without Wall Street," and this older lady comes walking up, and she says, "Tell me, what is that?" And I said, "What? Wealth Without Wall Street?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's my company." You know, she said, "Well, what do y'all do?" So, well, we teach people different passive income opportunities and how to create your passive income operating system. And she says, she said, that's super interesting. Well, we just retired, and I hope it's enough. That was her. So think about that. Like, this is one just off the beaten path conversation. But what I gathered from that one comment was this. What did she have to do to get to retirement? She was just stacking up cash. She was trying to live scarce so that she could save enough.
Good.
And then she gets to the pinnacle. Like, you think about it. Retirement. I am at the pinnacle. This is the goal I've been looking for. And we believe the lie that we're going to all of a sudden start living abundantly. I'm going to travel all the time. I'm going to go see my grandkids. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And what did she say? I hope it's enough. So do you think that person that says that is going to be living any more abundantly than before?
No. Probably even more of a scarcity mindset than she ever did.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I'm just telling you that the alternative, when you start taking control of your finances, and you just really start with the most simple and most basic, if you go away from this podcast with one thing, the only thing I want you to hear is, if your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses, you're financially free.
Yeah.
This is the scorecard, right?
Yeah.
You don't need Wall Street. You don't need some financial advisor that has, ratings and, degrees and all that. If you can create more passive income than monthly expenses, and you can keep track of that, like right now, you said it very clearly. If you make $2,000 a month passive income, and your expenses are $10,000 a month, you're 20% of the way to financial freedom. Is that that's easy math? This is not hard. The hardest part is becoming an investor to say, what am I going to take this money? I'm going to go do. And that's what we're about, is we're trying to help people to see, one, how simple it is, and then two, equip you with the system to make it possible.
I love that, dude. So walk me through. So you guys have this dream to start this business, Wealth Without Wall Street. Like, walk me through, like, maybe the first couple clients, or the kind of the origination story of this whole thing. And when did you have, like, who's the client? When you saw what they did, that you went, we're on to something. Like, this is going to work.
Well, I'll tell you, I wish it was, this way cooler story. Okay. But I can't be anything but honest. When we first started this journey, the only thing that we could see, and I think of it like a long tunnel, Ken, you're at one end and you're looking out the other end. You could just see this little bit of light, right? It's like a hole. You can see the end of that, and there's just a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But as you start walking down that tunnel, all of a sudden that hole, that view comes into much bigger, and all of a sudden it's way brighter, all the stuff as you get closer to it. Well, for us, the end of the tunnel was starting this whole concept called the infinite banking concept. That was what's in that book, Become Your Own Banker. And really all it was is to say, man, you need a system to start putting money into your control. Stop putting in IRAs and 401ks and 529 plans and all these garbage alphabet soup that Wall Street's trying to dupe you into, right? Just put it into the right system so now you have access to cash. And that's what we started with, Ken. I'm just being honest. We started stacking up cash in these really like specifically structured whole life insurance contracts. And as we did that, it begged the question, what do you do with it? And if you asked me in 2010 when I started, the only thing I could think of was maybe buy a piece of real estate or you start lending it to people, because I was in the mortgage business. Like those are my only two things I could think of. But when we started our podcast in 2017, we started asking the question to people that did know what to do with it. And that started our journey to becoming investors, because we were not investors before that. We were just good stewards of putting capital in the right place. But it took an education, it took a process to figure out, man, what do we start doing with this? And we started asking people that were way smarter than us. And that changed everything. So I don't know if that was what, this climactic story you were looking for, but that's
sometimes, dude, listen, Nate and I, we recorded a podcast today in here before you came on. And, I just told people, I just gave people permission. I'm like, listen, we started this 5 years ago. My studio is great. It looks awesome in here. I had a janky step and repeat banner that had wrinkles. It was terrible. My microphone was terrible. I said, my favorite Jim Rohn quote is speed increases focus. The more you move in the direction of the vision that God's put in your heart, the more things become in focus. And you're like, I didn't know that. Let me add that. This is a little different. Let me change this goal or this bullseye that I'm aiming for. Tell me a little bit about some of the people that you've been able to help. Give me some success stories.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of people just come to mind right away. It's people like Sid, one of these guys that called us up one day. He's like, hey, I heard you guys help people set up these infinite banking policies. This is a foundational thing. And again, he didn't know what he was going to do with it at the time. Just like I mentioned, Russ and I didn't know. But he was an excavator, worked for a family business up in Utah. And his wife was a nurse full time. And as we started talking, he's like, man, I'd really love to eventually one day retire my wife. She wants to be home. She wants to help our children grow and all this sort of thing and homeschool. And he's like, that would be great. Well, it wasn't an immediate thing, but as he started to put capital into his control, he called me up, and this is a dramatic story, but he said he had been out snow biking. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, not at all.
It's like a motorcycle, with a.
I love Salt Lake City. I go several times a year, just not when it's like 3 feet of snow here.
Well, he literally said this is what he and his family love doing. Yeah. He ends up getting in a wreck on the side of a mountain and broke his leg. It was him and his brother. And he's laying there on the side of the mountain waiting to be airlifted out. And you know what his first thought was? He was like, man, I need to start creating some passive income quick. Here I am, an excavator with a broken leg. I'm not going to be able to provide like I had intended to. And guess what, Ken? There's a lot of people right now listening to this show who are in the same position, but they've not had the incident.
So right? Good.
And guess what he said? He said, man, I've been listening to y'all's show. You talked about this land flipping business with Mark Podolsky, thelandgeek.com. And he said, I think I just got to start down this process. Well, I'm going to save you all the details, but long story, within 18 months, the dude has created $15,000 a month from buying pieces of raw land and flipping them on owner finance notes to retail buyers. His wife gets to get home from nursing. That's his first job, right? She gets retired. Secondly, they get up to $50,000 a month in passive income. He's no longer required to do any excavation work with his family. He does it from time to time for fun. Just because he enjoys able to be engaged with his family and they're all home, all because he took control, he put capital in the right location, and he educated himself on a process that then became this massive opportunity for him to accomplish all his goals and get all his freedom back. That
What
to
do
me
you?
is one of the greatest
Yeah.
examples of what we've been able
What
to
do you?
see.
What do you say to somebody who's listening to this, Joey, and they're like, "This can't be real"? Because I'm telling you, the first time I heard Ryan D. Lee share this, I was like, "Whoa!" It's almost like I don't know if you know who Gary Brecka is.
Yeah.
Gary's one of my closest friends. He's been like through this my whole health journey. I've lost 100 pounds in 5 years, and I met Gary about 6 months into that process. And it's like the first time I sat in Gary's condo in May of 2021, and he talked about how diabetes, we're the only country in the world that calls Alzheimer's and dementia. Every other country in the world calls it diabetes 3.
Mm.
It's they don't even call it Alzheimer's and dementia because they understand it's diabetes. It's the brain going after the sugar solenoid plaque builds up in the synapse, and you can't access your memory. And I'm sitting there listening to Gary, and I'm like, dude, I've never heard this before. Like, and it's the same thing. Like, people hear this. When I heard Ryan D. Lee share this, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? What do you say? Because people are going to be listening to this, and they're like, dude, and I know we did and then we'll drop this in the show notes as well, guys. They did a resource page just for us. It's wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/as the leader grows. And we'll drop it in the show note. Like, what do you say to people? Because people hear this, bro. They're like, there's no way.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you my personal example because I don't think there's any better one. I was working in the mortgage business at Wells Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading this book, Become Your Own Banker. I'm learning this concept, and it's talking about strategically designed whole life insurance policies. So what do? I do my due diligence. I start going around to the different VPs, the executive VPs in the bank in our town here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I start asking them, hey, I know you guys are involved in all sorts of like high level business banking relationships and so on and so forth. Like, tell me, what do you think about this idea? Like putting cash into these life insurance policies and building up cash value and then leveraging those to buy assets and stuff like that. And you know what every one of them said? They said, that's a terrible idea. Like everybody knows you don't put money in life insurance. Like that's that's the worst idea you could ever do. And then what was so funny and ironic about this is I looked at the FDIC.gov at their balance sheet at Wells Fargo. And simultaneous to this conversation with the highest level people I knew at the bank, that Wells Fargo is putting $19 billion into cash value life insurance. As a comparison, that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But in all of their real estate holdings, they only had $8 billion. So think about that. They have more than double the amount of real estate holdings in cash value life insurance. And these are the people who are being insured by the bank telling me it is a bad idea. So if you think that this is crazy, I've never heard of this, you're not alone, number one. In fact, it's uncommon advice. And what you normally hear is very common advice. It's very common strategies. And very common results come from common advice and strategies. So you have to level up your thinking and see what is the bank doing, not what the bank is saying. Okay? Because the bank is constantly working for the bank's benefit, not for yours. And so is Wall Street. So I don't mean to be like, crazy about it, but that was an aha moment for me that I think you got to start getting outside of the main, like the just common circles to get uncommon advice.
It's the same thing. Like, when I heard Ryan talk about this first time and I heard Gary talk about health the first time, I'll never forget sitting in Gary's living room and he goes, hypothetically speaking, if you came to me and said, Gary, I want you to put me on a diet that would guarantee that I had diabetes in the next 3 to 5 years, I'd take you right over to the American Diabetes Association and I'd put you on the recommended diet. And in 3 to 5 years, you would have diabetes. I was like, what? Like, I was like I was in the Matrix, bro. It's like I took the red pill and I woke up and I'm like, what is going on? And it's the same thing with finances. Tell me real quick about you and Russ's passion to help people escape. I would what's called the matrix, to help people escape and understand because people at that level, I mean, I've been to Ryan's house. I've worked out together. I talked to him yesterday. Like, we're close. I've been to his house in Lehigh. By the way, he just broke his ankle snow skiing and had to have surgery last week. He's going to be in it. He's going to be in Atlanta next week for the NCAA tournament. He has a bunch of clients, and I'm going to be hanging out with him. Nice. But I've been to his home. I've seen the passion that he has for people. Talk about you and Russ's passion for doing what you do.
Well, I think it all boils down to, we don't necessarily lead with this everywhere, because I don't know that I don't want to confuse people that this is a Christian idea necessarily.
Yeah.
But man, there is a real passion for impact. And I believe at the end of the day, entrepreneurs and business owners and really highly paid professionals are the same way. They have so much to give in this world, but so many times we're doing things unnecessarily and unknowingly that is actually putting us in more of a financial jail, because we just think that this is what we're supposed to do. And so ultimately, man, if you can steward the gifts, and I'm talking about all the gifts, but financially is where we, really hone in. If we can help you unlock and steward the wealth and the opportunity that God has given you, all of a sudden, man, you can become who you were created to be. And I'm not saying that what you do now is not worthwhile or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you right now, if I asked you, what would you be doing if your calendar was your own? There's a lot of things that you leave off the list because you just cannot get to them. You cannot. You don't have the bandwidth or the the ability to give back at the level that you want to. And this one idea, being able to be financially free, create more passive income out of the active income that you have, it just makes sense to make the most of every opportunity that we've been given. All of these resources we're stewards of, and time is one of the most amazing things that we give up constantly because we don't have another option. So that to me is what's super important. We have a lot of people that are not Christians that work with us for sure. But man, anytime that we get the opportunity to help somebody steward what they've been given, I think that's where
it's amazing. We're talking about this conversation. We're in the middle of like a 2 or 3 week series in our online ecosystem, our communities that we have at GSD, and we're talking about finances. We're talking about wealth and what it looks like wealth from a kingdom perspective, a correct kingdom perspective. Let me say that, like not where God's not this big Christian lotto where you give and you're going to get. It's not about again. There's nothing wrong with the car, nothing wrong with the watch, nothing wrong with the beach house, nothing wrong with any of those things. But that's not why we go after finances. We go after finances so we can be obedient and steward. You said steward. I talked about it this morning. Like, we don't own, as a Christ follower, I don't own what I have. I manage that for God. And as I manage that well, God promises, Matthew 25 in the parable of the talents, he promises to give me more. So I can then in turn, I was sharing this week. I was at prayer Saturday morning at my church, and the associate pastor comes up. He actually went to Highlands College with my daughter, who's on staff there in Birmingham. Kevin was on staff at Highlands for several years. And I said, dude, how are you doing? Good, man. Ministry's great, blah, blah, blah. And I said, how are you and mama doing? And he just looked at me and he goes, we're good, man. I went, how are you really doing? Like, I know how hard ministry is. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I said, when's the last time you took your wife out on a date? And he goes, it's been about 3 or 4 weeks. And I said, he goes, man, it's tight. And I said, I get it, dude. Send me your Venmo. No, man, no. I said, listen, dude, I've done what you're doing. I understand. So he sent me his Venmo. I forwarded it over to my executive assistant. I said, send him $200. Babysitter, dinner. You and your wife go have fun.
Done.
Like that's the reason God gives us what he gives us, is so we can do things like that and fund the kingdom and do the things that he desires for us to do. Stewardship is a huge deal. Obviously, being a Christ follower, it's a big deal.
Can I add something to that, Ken?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. This is something cool. I think the Lord really revealed to me years ago around the talents conversation. People sometimes they think that whole conversation. You think about the one talent steward, right? And I never really looked at this, but I started to really dig into this at one point. And he says in there, I thought you to be
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
harsh master,
Man.
right? And and so I was fearful, and I hid the money, and I just essentially hoped for the best, basically.
Mhm.
And what did the steward say? I mean, not the steward. I'm sorry. The owner say. He said, "You knew me to be a harsh master," right? Which was actually kind of tongue in cheek, because he
Mhm.
was, in
Mhm.
fact, the guy did not know the master. That's what
Mhm.
really came out of that.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
second thing he said, "You lazy and wicked servant."
Servant.
So here's the real call to action. If you've been afraid of
Mhm.
becoming an investor, you're like, man, I just rather give this to somebody else. It's
Mhm.
not an option, guys.
Mhm.
You are called to be a steward. And that means, man, I got to take action. I got to be
Mhm.
involved. Nobody would ever say, you know what, you don't really know how to be a good dad because you didn't have a good model, and you never went through a class on being a
Mhm.
good
Mhm.
parent. Well, you should just let somebody else do that.
Mhm.
That would never happen, right? Or
Yeah.
your health, or your
Yeah.
health, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you say,
Yeah.
well, I don't know how to eat well. I don't know how to work out. I'm just going to let somebody. No, nobody. It's your health. It's your family. It's the money that was entrusted to you. Man, guys, we have to take back control. We have to take action. We have to
Mhm.
be educated on becoming an investor if we're not already.
Mhm.
And I'm just telling you, I want to call you to that, because
Mhm.
there's a lot more abundance on the other side. Not just because, oh man, I make more money. It's being able to do things, Ken, like what you're talking
Mhm.
about. Man,
Mhm.
being able to invest in others, and
Yeah.
just so much
You know,
stronger.
one of the things I think, Joey, I was sharing today. I don't know if you've read "Making of a Millionaire Mind" by T. Harv Eker, or the complete works of Frances Scovel Shinn. She wrote that in 1925. I don't believe she's a believer, but there's a ton of scripture all through the book, and it's just very, very, very good when it comes to mindset around money. Well, T. Harv Eker, I'm pretty confident he's not a believer, but in there he talks about your money blueprint, like and it comes from your earliest memories of
Mm.
money. And one of my earliest memories from money was my dad had sent my mom a check for child support. And in the memo, he wrote superfluous funds. That's how I learned the definition of superfluous. And my mom, which, if you're a mom and you're divorced, I don't recommend you do this. But my mom, to get back at my dad, showed me, I was like 8 or 9. And that was so she had to teach me what the definition was. And I'm like, oh, I'm, I guess not supposed to have any money. And
Mm.
that was and if we go back into our money blueprint, I think a lot of people think, well, there's no way I can invest, or there's no way I can be at 15 grand a month, or 50 or 5 for that matter,
Right.
because their money blueprint and the way that they think about money is so corrupted from when they were children. What's some
Uh,
of the things that you tell the people you work with about what T. Harv Eker and Secrets of Millionaire Mind would say, their money blueprint?
well, I don't know if I can go into a whole lot of detail here, but I want to share one thought, especially if we're talking to people who are believers. The church has done a ridiculously bad job talking
Terrible.
about money. And I'll just quote you a couple of things that come to mind. Like, have you ever heard people talk about, it's impossible for a rich man to get into heaven, but it's like a camel going through the eye of the needle, right? And so what you read that, and you think, without context, you're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to be the rich guy, because, whew, I mean, I don't want to be not getting into heaven. Well, the context of that is, it's impossible for man to get to heaven, period.
Period. Yeah.
I don't care if you're rich or not. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, what does rich mean?
Mhm.
If you're in the Middle East,
Mm.
is rich the same as it is in Georgia or Alabama or California? Whatever. We have this idea that there's a rich number that we just have come up
Mm.
with, that I don't want to be that person, because the Bible says that that's going to be impossible for me to get in heaven. The idea is, man, we in America are richer than 90 something percent of the world
Yeah.
at 30,000 a year.
We're the 30,000 is the top 1% of everybody in the entire world.
So okay, is God ever in the Bible talking about a checklist of, oh, you have to stay under this amount of money or else you can't be a Christian, you can't go to heaven? No, he's always talking about your heart. Jesus was always talking about your heart. In money, one of the things he talked about the most, because it reveals the heart unlike anything else. And man, I'll tell you, I could keep talking about this for days, Ken, but the big thing is I want to say, man, that money blueprint, if you've been a believer growing up in the church, you got to unlearn a lot of stuff around money because it was poorly positioned. The context is way off. And man, just think about it as it's a great thumbprint on your heart. Money is always a thumbprint on your heart. It's never a dollar amount that keeps you from heaven or anything like that.
We've done in the church, we've done one of two things. It's either the stay away from money, almost the poverty mentality because it's terrible, all the way to, God's this cosmic roulette wheel guy. And if you put enough money on the right one and you hit it, then God's going to bless you. And he's not either of those. Like it's when you go into Matthew 25, and I love what you said about the steward, the steward on the one talent. Like, God, you've given me this money. I've talked about it now for 2 weeks in our online community. God, you've given me this money. What do you want me to do with it? Like, what do you have? Because listen, number one, you steward, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to him. But God, what would you have me do with this money? And I think when you get to that point, then it stops becoming about, let me say this. I don't think you can live a life where you're like, okay, God, what do you want me to do with your money, your resources you've given me, and have a scarcity poverty mindset at the same time? I don't think you can have both of those things at the same time. Dude, listen, I know we've got this wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/as the leader grows. I almost said my own website on there. You've got some resources on there, guys. One of them is literally a free quiz. One's just resources, tools, guides, how to accelerate your journey to financial freedom. I'm not selling anything, guys. I don't have anything to sell you on here. I would just encourage you to go listen, go look, just be inquisitive. God, what does this mean for me? First time I ever met Joey, I have so many people in my life doing the exact same thing that Joey's talking about. And I've seen God just work on their behalf in an amazing, amazing way. Now I'm watching them be able to give and be givers at the level. And I've said this before, Joey, like their giving is a spiritual gift. Out of the 24, 26 spiritual gifts we get in the New Testament, one of those is giving. And you can have the spiritual gift of giving and not necessarily have the resources to be able to do what you want to do. Like you can still be a giver and not have the resources. But it's about getting your mindset in alignment with what God wants you to do and understanding, listen, without knowledge, people perish. Like without vision, you've got to have the right information. Two things get you to the next level: right relationship and the right information. Gets you to the next level every single time. Joey, last thoughts for our audience, my friend?
And one thing that I left out that I want to just encourage people to do, this has been a game changer for us, is we recognize that, man, God has created each of us differently, to see the world differently, to give resources and experiences differently. And it affects what you should invest in. Okay. So what I'm saying is most people, they hear about Wealth Without Wall Street. They say, hey, Joey, so what should I invest in if I don't invest in Wall Street? And I say, well, it's less about what you invest in. It's who are you as an investor? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you have a unique investor DNA profile that you need to understand. And what I'm talking about, we've built this whole profile. So if you engage with our stuff, you'll eventually get to this profile that you can take. It's a quiz. It actually is based off of the DISC profile, if you're familiar with the DISC. And man, if you're a DI, you should not invest in the same things as an SC, right? Or
I'm a DI.
CS. Well, I figured you're a DI. I'm an SI. And guess what? We should be invested in different things. Yeah. And it's because we're going to actually go faster when we invest in the things that really give us life. that we have an engagement in. And I'll give you an example. Russ is an ID, and he invested in just a rental property in at his college town in Auburn. And he's like, man, it was fine. I mean, money was coming in. Somebody else is managing it. It was hands off, but it was boring as sin. And I didn't want to keep doing that. And so I just quit investing in those type of things, and probably lost 5 to 10 years that he could have been investing in something that was much more in line with him. And so anyways, I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you get a chance, take that, because that's another step on your journey to really figuring this out. Because some people are like, okay, sounds good, Joey. How do I start? Go get your profile and then start down the path, because it'll help you kind of filter down. I think we got like 16 or 18 different passive income matrix that you can figure out which one might be a good fit for you.
It's for you. I love that. In the bottom of my planner I created about 3 or 4 years ago, there's a quote right here. And it says, get in rooms with people who think bigger than you do. And guys, it's proximity really is a cheat code. When you get around the right people, and I've said this a million times, like every time in our core 5 areas, faith, health, relationship, business, or finances, every time you go to the next level in any of those areas, it is always tied to a relationship. It's somebody that God's brought in your life. Psalms 37 says the footsteps of a righteous person are ordered by the Lord. Like when you get around the right people, and guys, if you're listening to this podcast, this is the right people. Jump on there, wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/as the leader grows. We'll drop the link in the show notes, and you can check it out. But just take action. Like, don't wait. Don't just sit and listen to it and think, wow, what would that look like? Go ahead and take action. Joey, thank you, my friend, for being with us today.
Dude, it was a pleasure to be here, and man, God bless you.
Can't wait to see you. I'm coming to Birmingham next week. We're going to hang out.
All right.
We'll go hit Perry's happy hour between 4 and 6 p.m. Guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of As the Leader Grows. Listen, we would love to connect with you. And one of the ways we do that is growstatdrive.com/free. growstatdrive.com/free. I got a text this week from my good buddy, Brendan Bouchard. I saw him. He's doing an event with my other good friend, Ed Milet. And I text Brendan a text, and he goes, dude, tomorrow's my birthday. He goes, guess what I'm going to do? I said, skydiving. He goes, hell no. He goes, I'm giving all of my resources that I had behind my paid wall. I'm giving them all away for free. And I just texted him back. I said, dude, I love that you would do that. Well, guys, we've been doing that since day one. Literally every resource we have, every Create conference recording, friends like Erwin McManus and Brendan Bouchard and Ed Milet, John Maxwell and Gary Brecka, myself, my team. It's just an unbelievable library of 5 separate Create conferences. All of that stuff's free. Our courses on mindset, strategy, leadership, everything's free. growstatdrive.com/free. We would love to connect with you. And again, our mantra is great leaders want something for people, not from people. Love you. See you next week. Dude, that was amazing, homie.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that was good, dude.